Hey, what's up, folks? How you doing today? Hey, Mr. Dev, I'm doing good. Hope you're doing good too. We're going to get started here in just a little bit. Hello, my friends. How you doing this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in the world? Welcome to Savage on Saturdays. This is where you show up because the PMP exam is just like this, my friend here. It's savage. You got to tame it. You got to be equally savage. You got to be crazier than the exam because this thing is a beast. You got to be savage against it, I tell you. We got some people from last week who are not here this week. You know why they're not here this week? They got savage. They ripped the exam into shreds. That's what I'm talking about. So I want to give a shout out to our friends, to Chris, to Carla, to Mira, to Melissa, and to Birani, who is not here. Very happy he is not here, and everyone else as well. So this is what we're up against. We need to get this book into our heads. We need to make sure that we've mastered this content. I always tell people you need to become a professor of this thing before you go into the exam. If there's any unturned stones, you need to turn those stones. Don't leave stones unturned. A big stone is the glossary. You have to go through the glossary with a fine-tooth comb. Have you been through the glossary in this thing? Now, if you don't do what you need to do with this, I have to remind you, it's my duty to remind you, that if you don't do what you need to do, folks, you're going to end up having to lug this 756-page book around. Pick your choice, this or this. 756 pages, 586 pages. I'd rather take this one, if you ask me. So today, I'm going to be showing you a few tips and tricks to be able to face that exam. I've heard all sorts of things about the exam. It's getting even tougher, it seems, because you know, the more people take the exam, the more people fail the exam. You probably knew that, because it's based on the Angoff cutoff technique. You might want to go read this up on Wikipedia or Google, but it's the Angoff cutoff technique. If you haven't read about the Angoff cutoff technique, you should, because that's what the PMP exam is based on. It's on this sliding scale. And if you've got a lot of people taking the exam, well, obviously more people are going to be on the passing end, and more people, of course, are going to be on the failing end. It's a thing of volume. So if you're taking the PMP exam, you want to be prepared. How do you get prepared apart from hauling those hours, taking those hours and shoving them down the street or down the hall, whatever the analogy is? Apart from that, you have to be smart. You see, if PMI is setting an exam, they're not going to make it a namby-pamby exam. It's going to be based on reality. It's going to be based on real-world stuff. A lot of people think the PMP exam is a fairy tale. No, it's not. It gives you questions. It puts you in the driver's seat. You are the project manager. You might want to write this down because this is going to be the order of the day when you take the exam. You're the project manager on a project. Here's the scenario. What should you do? You're a project manager building this. You're a project manager programming this with a team. What should you do? So take a look at a few tips I have for you. You might want to get a pen and paper ready. Apart from the fact that I've shared this online on YouTube, I have a link because in less than about 30 minutes, we're going to be taking a quiz. That's right, because today's time management. So after I go through a few easy questions with you, I would like you to take a more difficult quiz. Well, a little bit more difficult, but not as crazy as our mock exams. Somewhere there in the middle, okay? So we'll do that within the next 30 minutes or so. But for now, I just want to share with you a few tips for your exam. I know that we've got a few students that may be taking the exam. If you're taking the exam in the next few days, why don't you chat in? If you have any questions for me today, why don't you chat them in now? Now's a good time. All right, well, let's take a look. So I'm going to talk about how you deal with long-winded questions. We have some students like Dev who are probably going to be taking the mock exam in the next week, right, Dev? Am I right? You're going to be taking that mock exam. So these are some recap points that might actually help you. So I'll talk about how to deal with long-winded questions, dealing with vague questions, and so on. So let's start from the top. If you're taking a mock exam, if you come across long-winded questions, one of the options is to not answer the question immediately, because some of the questions are actually time wasters. So you need to be careful that you're not wasting your time. You need to make sure that you truly are going to get the question right the moment you see it. And that takes a lot of training. Because it's very easy, you see, to think you know a question only to read it for 2 minutes and you find out, oh, I don't know it. So the more questions you've dealt with, the more you'll know whether a long-winded question makes sense to answer or not. For me, long-winded questions, I leave them till the very end. Don't waste your time. Don't start plowing down, oh, I'm going to answer this. My advice is find your gimmies first, and then you can deal with the long-winded questions after, because the gimmies are out there. You just need to find them. What about vague questions? Same thing. Don't waste your time on them just yet. Find all of your gimmies and then attack the vague questions. These two, they could kill your exam. If you allow yourself to be cornered by difficult or vague questions, you could easily fall off the wagon. The third point is the project manager is a problem solver. So if you come across a question, the likelihood is that it's trying to get the project manager to solve a problem. Most likely the project manager should not hold a meeting to cry to senior management. Most likely the PM needs to do something proactive. Usually the PM is not expected to say, sorry, we are not able to do this. That doesn't solve any problem. Saying we can't do it or we didn't do it or we have a problem, it's not usually the best thing. Read the entire answer sentence as something could make it wrong. This is a very good point because I was actually working on a mock exam before I came on, and I happened to read it about 75%. There was one word I didn't read, and this is a question I wrote about 6 months ago or so, but I actually got it wrong. Sorry to say, I got my own question wrong because I didn't read it fully. There was one tiny thing that made it different and I missed it. So always read the entire sentence if something could make it wrong. Answer the questions as though you're in a strong matrix or projectized firm. This is big. Any questions on the exam, you need to think about yourself in a strong matrix organization. You need to think about yourself as one who can make decisions, as one who can hire, fire, reward, even punish. So don't think of yourself as being in a weak matrix or functional organization. Even though you might be in the real world, put yourself into that strong matrix because the PM has authority to do stuff. Be sure to answer all the questions. So even if it's C that you choose as the option for everything, please make sure you answer all the questions, because if you don't, you're just losing out. You're losing out on a potential, let's say 1 out of 4 in a chance of you getting it right. Pacing yourself is very important. So if you have not practiced the art of pacing yourself, I'll say definitely take more of these mock exams to do that, and take breaks if you need them. A lot of people just go in there and they want to just plow through the whole thing. Don't do that. Take breaks, but you need to practice taking breaks. And if you can practice taking breaks, you'll find out that it really pays off. All right? Hi, Nima, how you doing? Good to see you. You're in Switzerland, if I remember correct. Abjit, thank you very much. Good morning. What's the time where you are? Good to see you guys. All right. So those are the high-level tips, but let's get into a few details. This is an example problem. You've seen this probably on YouTube. This was a presentation that I made on YouTube, but I'm going to talk about these 3 questions from that deck again. This says you have just been assigned to the PLC LLC project. Everything appears to be going well. You just reported on status to your boss when suddenly you discover a big problem that needs to be resolved. What should you do immediately? All right. So you just reported on status and you discover a big problem. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to link in your head, even though it's not verbatim here, they're trying to link in your head the report you just made with the so-called big problem that needs to be resolved. Now, we don't know what that problem is. It doesn't tell us what it is. We don't know if it's time, cost, scope, or risk, or procurement even. But it says, what should you do? Well, first off, if you're a PM and you come across a big problem, what should you do? Solve the problem. How do you solve the problem? Analyze first. If you can't do the analysis by yourself, analyze with a team, but analyze it and then solve the problem. So let's see the options. Even before we read the options, always think, what could the outcome, the best outcome be? So let's see. A, call a meeting of all the stakeholders to recommend schedule compression approaches. Right off the bat, we want to cancel this option, okay? And I'm just going to illustrate this because I want people to really remember that on the PMP exam, you are going to be given a strike out functionality. So you're going to be able to strike out options like this, okay? By following one of the commands. I think it's a right-click command, I think, or left-click, one of those. But you're going to be able to strike through that whole thing. So call a meeting. Why am I canceling call a meeting? Because it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. Call a meeting of all stakeholders to recommend schedule compression, but we don't even know what the problem is. So it can't be schedule compression approaches. So I cancel that one. The second one says, speak to your customer immediately and share the bad news early before it's too late. So here's the trick. It says bad news. What bad news? How do we know that there's bad news? It doesn't say there's bad news. It says there's a big problem that needs to be resolved. But we don't know for sure if that's bad news, 1. And 2, it says, speak to your customer immediately. You can't speak to your customer immediately without doing some analysis if it was the customer to be informed. But the customer isn't even mentioned here. So again, we would cancel option B. So the process of elimination, folks, is going to help you on your exam. If you can follow the process of elimination, You get rid of all the things that don't make sense. It's really going to help. Okay? So B, speak to your customer immediately and share the bad news early before it's too late. So we got rid of that one as well. Let's take a look at option C. It says, research the problem. Research the problem to identify a possible solution using expert judgment and historical information from similar past projects. You see, that makes sense because really in the world of project management, there's such a thing as risk management. And this could fall into the bucket of a risk that we didn't even see come in. It could be, right? It says research the problem. You see, it doesn't make mention of scope, time, cost, or anything. It's rather generic. So I wouldn't just cancel that without having a better option. Right now, among A, B, and C, that is the best one for now. Taking a look at the fourth one, it says call your boss and let him know the bad news. There they go again with bad news. We can't say it's bad news. That is rather vague, and at the same time, a big problem that needs to be resolved could be anything. It could be a problem the PM needs to resolve as usual. So we don't really know if that's bad news. It says he should not leave the office with this incorrect information. What is incorrect? We don't know that anything is incorrect. Let's read it again. It says, you've just been assigned to the PLC LLC project. Everything appears to be going well. You just reported on status to your boss when suddenly you discover a big problem that needs to be resolved. What should you do immediately? So immediately you find a problem you need to analyze and assess. That makes sense. This one, calling your boss, oh, there's a problem. But it doesn't say that's what you're doing. It says, let him know the bad news. It didn't even say, let him know what the problem is. So this is even vague as well. He should not leave the office with this incorrect. What do we know from the question that alludes to incorrect information? You see what they're doing? They're putting words into your head in the answer. And this is exactly how people fail the exam, by taking a look at the options and saying, oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, he shouldn't leave the office with incorrect information. Maybe the report is wrong. Those are maybes, and you cannot guarantee that. So my suggestion to you in answering PMP exam questions, don't go with options that put words into your head. I might as well write another option and say, your report was wrong, the status was wrong. Don't let the boss go thinking that the status is what you said it is when it's something different. That's what they're trying to make you think, but it's a trick. So again, you can use the process of elimination and cancel that bad boy there, and the right answer is actually C. It's amazing how many people get that one wrong, because a lot of people go with call your boss. And beware of call your boss and call a meeting and stuff like that. Okay? So let's move on to the next problem. And these are all just typical ones that I would like you to beware of. Here's another one. You are working with a risky vendor who has been known to underdeliver in previous projects. What should you do before executing? Now again, another vague sounding one. What do you mean by a risky vendor? Okay, a vendor who has been known to underdeliver. Okay, so we're talking about the vendor's performance not being satisfactory in some way. So what should we do before executing? Think about it. There are many things you could do. You want to take action that is of a risk nature to make sure that this vendor doesn't throw you off track on your project, whatever that could be. But you can also think about this vendor being a subcontractor and you being a contractor as well. You've got a customer, there's you, and you've got a sub working on this project. You see, these are things to think about. So let's see. A, purchase performance bonds. What are performance bonds? Performance bonds are typically purchased by someone who has been given work to do for another entity. The other entity could demand that performance bonds be purchased. Okay? B, fire the vendor. C, do a what-if scenario analysis for each project iteration. And lastly, create a performance report. So let's go through this in our heads, okay? If you're working with a risky vendor who has been known to underdeliver in previous projects, you need to make sure that you've got insurance of some sort. That sounds like performance bonds. Or if you're working for the government, for example, and you're a contractor, you may need to purchase performance bonds, especially if they think your project is at risk. Fire the vendor. We're going to leave A and look at fire the vendor. Makes no sense, so again, we're going to cancel B. But I want you to think through all of them the same way I did the other one. Do a what-if scenario analysis for each project iteration. First of all, when they talk about iterations, it's usually language used where we have things being done in an iterative fashion. There's really nothing in the question that alludes to it being an iterative life cycle, you know. It doesn't sound like that. If we go with C, we're going to have to assume what the question doesn't say. Again, it says, do a what-if scenario analysis. Well, if the vendor is carrying out this work, I would assume that they would do the what-if scenario analysis. But then again, I've got another element of doubt, project iteration. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with C. And then I'm going to hold that for now and take a look at D and see what D says. Create a performance report. We obviously can't create a performance report before executing. So now it comes down to two. We got two options. So we really need to consider purchasing performance bonds. If the vendor is working for you and you happen to have a third party or a customer that the actual project is for, it would make sense. Do a what-if scenario analysis for each project iteration is a little bit too uncertain for me. Now it comes down to two. Could it be this? It could if the question said it. But as far as purchasing performance bonds, that seems to be the most likely option associated with a risky vendor. So assuming you had a customer that this is for, you would need to purchase performance bonds. So C seems more uncertain to me than A. And in cases like this, these are what could waste your time on the exam, but you're just going to have to go with one. These are those in your face questions I talk about. The actual answer to this question is A, okay? And it's one of those borderline ones that a lot of people cry about. Well, this is what you're going to face on the exam, folks. A lot of in-your-face questions. A few days ago, a student said, hey, it can't be A, it has to be C. And I said, don't forget, you actually could be working on a project as the performing organization that has a vendor working under them. So A and C, they make you scratch your head a little bit, but that's life on the PMP exam. I've got one more that I wanted to show you, but that is not here at the moment. That one alluded to the different organizational theories and was kind of like a play on words. If you watch the video on YouTube, you'll find that one. But let's go here to my colleague Emily's 4-point tips for answering questions. She's given us more tips. So 1, look at the impact. Look at the impact of the actions at hand or whatever is happening. 2, evaluate the alternatives. That's what the PM should do at all times, right? What is the impact? What alternatives do I have? The next in line will be to discuss with the sponsor. So if you've got options that say, look at the impact, that would be the best thing. Then you evaluate the alternatives. That would be the next best thing. Discuss with the sponsor or get sponsor approval would come next in line. You don't just discuss with the sponsor without doing this. So if 1 and 2 are not available, then maybe 3 is a plausible one. And last but not least, get customer approval. Okay, usually comes last. She also has her 5-point tips for PMP exam formula questions. Write the formulas on your crib sheet at the beginning. Obviously, PMI doesn't give you that luxury anymore, so that chunk of time is coming out of your 4 hours. Before doing anything, ensure it's truly a calculation question. One of my students got into the exam and found a network diagram question and got so excited and started rubbing his hands in glee and just started doing a finish to start to finish, drawing the whole thing out, and then finding the critical path, doing a forward path and a backward path. And at the end of the day, he finally got to the bottom line of the question, and the question was something to the effect of the critical path. Now, you guys know on the critical path, slack or float is what? Chat into me. What is slack or float on the critical path? Hi, Zimakona. Good to see you. Oh, dear. Oh. Thank you, Nima. Good to know that it is right click. It's been over a year I took a PMI exam, and I'm sorry to hear that. We have to nail this thing down, this bad boy down. So Nima says, slack or float on the critical path is the least number. When it comes to slack or float, it's always 0 on the critical path. But this student got so excited and couldn't even wait and just started solving the network diagram for what they didn't even ask. So you always need to make sure that you've got a calculation question before you begin answering it. He could have just said, oh, slack or float is 0. But instead, he started solving the whole thing out. Okay, so you actually want to make sure it's a calculation question before anything else. Actually work these things out. If it is a calculation question, work it out, or if you're running out of time, you've got to guess it and just move on. Don't feel uncomfortable in guessing. Like on my exam, 4 hours went by very quickly. So I was at 3 hours, 55 minutes. Ran out of time. Just had to call it a day and say my last prayers. Number 4, take the numbers and plug them in. And lastly, check your work. So, any comments or concerns so far? Nima, I'm really sorry to hear that. Zimakona, good to see you. As I said, Abjit, thank you for participating. And Dev, I hope you are enjoying your data flow videos. Keep those videos rolling, okay? Abjit says, I'm averaging about 65% in the test. Do you think I'm good to go for the exam? So I'm not sure which quiz that is, Abjit. Is that one of our quizzes? Because if it's a quiz from external, I'm actually not very sure what that training provider's quizzes mean, because different training providers have quizzes that mean different things. I've come across some training providers' quizzes that actually need to be in the 80s before you're certain. Our quiz is a 70, so not sure. Nima's laughing at my comment. Okay. Good. I'm happy that you're enjoying those data flows, Dev. Okay. Well, let's advance in this presentation and see what we've got for today. That's my buddy Pat, who trains with us, former military. He trains PMP with us now. Pat was actually in one of my classes. You see, a lot of people that come through my classes, they end up helping us train and coach others. So I'm looking forward to you guys getting certified so that one of these days we can do this either virtually or in person. So today is all about time management. We need to understand time management, all the tools, the techniques, the processes, and so on. And that's really what we're going to be covering. All right? So it's going to be kind of quick. This is really what time management is all about, developing a schedule. People call this a project plan, but that's wrong. In the real world, what they call it is totally different from what PMI calls it. This is a schedule in Microsoft Project. We've got the define activities process. Sequence activities is exemplified in the Gantt chart and the relationships and how the different bars are joined. Estimate activity resources is exemplified in the resource names. Estimate activity duration would be exemplified in a duration column, which could be shown as well. And we've got the finish, baseline finish, and the deadline and stuff like that. So this is really what Chapter 6 is all about, okay? So I want you guys to chat into me. Schedule baseline. Schedule baseline is an output of which process? Type that in. Dev said, I would like to tell other PMP aspirants in the world, kindly do not go to the PMP exam before going through this data flow diagram video from Praizion. Well, that's very nice of you to say, Dev. That has helped a lot of people, really helped a lot of people, and ITTO Science as well. So thank you for sharing that. So, did you guys get it right? Nima seems to have gotten it right. It is develop schedule. Thank you very much. Develop schedule is the process where we get the schedule baseline. Great. All right. So this is where we are in time management. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see the process names. So this is where we are. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. So if you take a look at time management, it's very dense, extremely dense in the planning process group. You have got plan schedule management, define activities, sequence activities, estimate activity resources. My gut instinct tells me that because estimate activity resources is the only process where resources are addressed throughout the PMBOK guide, that's low-hanging fruit. This is one you definitely want to hone in on. Know how to estimate activity resources, know what the resource breakdown structure is, all that stuff. Highly recommend it. We've got estimate activity durations, and then we've got develop schedule, another one of the sacred cows of the PMI. And last but not least, if we move to the controlling side, we can see we've got control schedule. Okay? Very important. Can anyone chat in? What is a unique output from control schedule that no other process has? Don't type in any of the W's because that won't work. Don't type in CRs. Don't type in PDP updates or PD updates or PMP updates. What is a unique output of control schedule? Unique output of control schedule. Fantastic, Abjit. Thank you very much. Abjit got that right. Nail that down in the chat. Thank you very much, Nima. You got that right. Thank you, Dev. I'm happy that you guys understand that schedule forecast is the unique output. And what you did just now, if you can do that for all the 47, you'll be a lot happier. All the 47, every single one. Know the unique outputs. That is a really big deal. So we got a good question come in a few seconds ago from Nima. Off-topic question, still in the zone, Nima. Until what date can I take the 5th edition exam? So the 5th edition exam can be taken up till March 25th. On March 26th, the PMI will cease to show you any questions based on the 5th edition. It's all going to be the 6th, my friend. So from the 26th, it's going to be the 6th. Just remember, the 6th on the 26th. The 5th ends on the 25th. Okay? We're going to get there. Just keep plowing. Just keep going through. Anyway, those are the processes, okay, in time management. I'm going to ask you a few more questions to make sure you've truly mastered these ones in planning. So can you chat into me? What is the unique output of plan schedule management? Well, there's only one output, so you better get that one right. What is the only output of plan schedule management? There is only one output that it could be. What is it? Thank you, Dev. You are absolutely correct. Just like all the other ones. Thank you, Abjit. I see that. Good. All right, let's move on. Tell me, what is the major output of defined activities that does not come from any other process? And if there's more than one, I want you to type out all three. What are the three major things, or maybe there are more, that are unique and do not come from anywhere else in the PMBOK guide? Thank you, Nima. Great job. All right. Too funny. All right, tell me. Define activities. Type them in. Thank you, Abjit. Milestone list, that's one. What are the other two? Thank you. Thank you, Atif. Good to see you. Very good. I'm glad you could make it today. The activity list, says Atif. And Dev says AA. Very good. Activity attributes. Good. Give me some examples of these activity attributes, because those are the ones that people often forget. Thank you, Abjit. Thank you, Nima. I see all those chats. So when it comes to activity attributes, what's the difference between an activity attribute and an activity list? Thank you, Dev. Dev says details of the activity. Very good. So you guys are in the zone. If you're getting this stuff, then I'm feeling a lot more comfortable about you doing well in this particular process. You see, for me, as I study, or as I studied, and as I study anything for, in the world of the PMI, because I've done 5 of these certifications, and in the process, I ended up doing 6 exams because my OPM 3 had 2 exams. But in my going through this stuff, what I ask myself is, what is the worst thing that the PMI could do to me on defined activities? What is their best shot? What is that going to look like? If they were going to throw me a curveball question, what would it look like? So guys, as you go through the content, you need to ask yourself, what is the trickiest of these things? All right? Now I'm going to open up my PMBOK guide, 5th edition, because there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff. The stuff in the PMBOK guide is so voluminous that it's easy for you to miss a few words. So I want to encourage you to, wherever you are studying, make that process your focus. Don't rush it. So now I'm on page 149, and I'm reading, define activities is the process of identifying and documenting the specific actions to be performed to produce the project deliverables. So let's say you were in a question, be honest, and you had In which process do you document the specific actions to produce the project deliverables? And you had direct and manage project work, or you had defined scope, create WBS. If you're not sure of what defined activities is, you could end up choosing one of the other things. You see, that's why I tell people hone in, hone in, hone in and highlight. Let's go to page 153. Under activity attributes on page 153 in the PMBOK Guide, 5th edition, there is a boatload of stuff that could be activity attributes. A boatload. It says activities distinct from milestones have durations during which the work of that activity is performed and may have resources and costs associated with that work. Activity attributes extend the description of the activity by identifying the multiple components associated with each activity. So they could come from the angle of which of these identifies multiple components associated with each activity. Just beware of the language, that's all I'm saying. As you study, as you read, highlight stuff, okay? Because we've got a boatload of these things. I can't even read them all, there's just too many. All right, so you guys are in the zone. I'm happy to hear that. Sequence activities, major output. Tell me, what do you get from sequence activities that you get from nowhere else? It is the only place in the PMBOK Guide where this stuff is mentioned. Well, I should say you find it once in quality as well. You find it in quality as one of the tools, one of those 7. But what is it? It's a bit of a mouthful. So leads and lags is actually in develop and control, but not that, okay? And you're thinking about a tool and technique. Thank you, Atif. That is the absolutely correct word, or should I say phrase. Project, schedule, network diagrams. Because you could have phase network diagrams, I guess. So it is project schedule network diagram. No, it's all good because that's why we're here. That's why we're here, folks, to find our weak spots and to find places where we're not completely firm. So that's good. And also the difference between a tool and technique versus, an actual output. So critical path. Safwan, good to have you. Thank you for calling in today. So the critical path, we see that being used as a tool and technique, but the output is, the full name is Project Schedule Network Diagrams, as Atif chatted in. Thank you, Nima, quite close. So Project Schedule Network Diagrams, good. Estimate activity resources, like I said, that is low-hanging fruit. Make sure you drill deep into that. You want to get all the oil out of that process. All the oil. You want to be ready for when the PMI serve you questions on those resources, okay? So when it comes to estimate activity resources, I'm just going to read it from the PMBOK Guide, page 160. It says, estimate activity resources is the process of estimating the type and quantities of material, human resources, equipment, or supplies required to perform each activity. The key benefit of this process is that it identifies the type, quantity, and characteristics of resources required to complete the activity, which allows more accurate cost and duration estimates. The inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs of this process are depicted in figure 6-12. And then you've got the data flow diagram on 6-13. So let's take a look at 6-12. The inputs, they're a no-brainer because what we're doing is we're trying to estimate the activity resources. So we need to have the activities, right? So if you take a look at the inputs, we have the schedule management plan that guides us on how to carry out this process. And then we have the activity list that we are estimating resources for. It makes sense. And if you're estimating resources, having the attributes doesn't hurt. because the attributes are going to help you understand relationships, what comes before this, what comes after. Based on what comes before, it might help you get some ideas about resources. Okay, maybe you use the same resource for two activities because they're back to back and in the same geographic location. Then you've got resource calendars that show you availability of resources on the project. Makes sense to have that available, right? Let's take a closer look at resource calendars on page 163. So, do you guys know the difference between a resource calendar and a project calendar? Let's read. It says, a resource calendar is a calendar that identifies the working days and shifts on which each specific resource is available. Information on which resources, such as human resources, equipment, and material are potentially available during a planned activity period is used for estimating resource utilization. So before you come out with an estimate, PMI is saying you need to have absolutes, you need to have that resource calendar to know Phil is available for 2 weeks. So we can assign him to the project, or we can estimate how many resources we need, including Phil, based on his availability. So it goes further to say resource calendars specify when and how long identified project resources will be available during the project. It says this information may be at the activity or project level. This knowledge includes consideration of attributes such as resource experience, you see those activity attributes again, and or skill level, as well as various geographical locations from which the resources originate and when they may be available. So folks, another point I would like to make about this book, the PMBOK Guide 5th edition, is that if you cannot get used to the language on this, you're not going to be used to the language on the exam. But if you're familiar with the quite bland, disinfected language, then you're going to do a lot better on the exam, because the language is going to be disinfected. It's going to be like a hospital. You know, when you go into a hospital, there's no character. It's all whitewashed and spick and span, no clues. That is exactly how the exam is. So the language, you need to get used to that boring language. And that's why I tell people, if you can crack through this thing, then you can actually, take the exam without having a headache. Because trust me, those questions can be so bland, disinfected, esoteric. You want to get used to this book. It's going to help you. All right. So that's estimate activity resources, estimate activity durations. There is a unique output. Tell me, what is the unique output? Hi, Thomas. Thank you very much for joining today. I am happy you are studying the PMBOK Guide. I'm curious, Thomas, is that the 5th? Is it this one? Or is it this one? Is it the new kid on the block or the old one? Thank you, Abjit. That is right. Activity duration estimates. Very good. Where do we get our RBS from then? So the resource breakdown structure, the trick is the RBS is where you have the word resource. So where you're doing your estimate activity resources, that is where you actually get your RBS. You're doing the 6th edition. Well, I'm happy to hear that you have started the journey, and what you're learning today is very much in line with the 6th edition, but the discussion is definitely going to help you, especially as you just listen casually. It's going to give you ideas for the 6th, but the tools and techniques in some of the processes are different. And I should also let you know, Thomas, the process we just talked about, estimate activity resources, if you were following along in the 6th edition, you probably noticed it's not there, because the PMI have taken this out of time management in the 6th edition, and they have actually moved it elsewhere. So The sign of things to come, folks. I didn't want to tell you that, but since Thomas is here, I had to let him know. But don't worry, you're going to take the fifth, all right, the rest of you, and you're going to kill it. And you don't have to read where estimate activity resources has been moved to. All right, so we had some chats come in, and Abjit got that right. It's the activity duration estimates. That is the unique output of estimate activity durations. You're welcome, Thomas. All right, so if we go to the actual process in the PMBOK guide, let's just have a cursory overview of estimate activity durations. So, folks, I want to call your attention to a big difference between two things people often mix up. I'm just going to write them up here as a reminder. There's a word known as effort. And effort is different from duration. Duration is what we're doing now. Effort is what we just looked at, even though we didn't go into the deep details. Effort is in estimate activity resources. Duration is in estimate activity durations. EAR versus EAD. Very, very important. So if you're on a project and you're trying to estimate the number of people, the number of hours they're working on the project, not duration. Effort is all about the resources. Duration is strictly about the passage of time. So estimate activity resources does the effort, estimate activity durations does the passage of time. It's going to take us 40 man-hours to complete this task, to dig this hole, to use a backhoe, whatever. But it's going to take us 3 days. 40 man-hours over 3 days, of course, means lots of people are working, or some people are working overtime or whatever. But there is a difference between duration and effort. 40 hours of effort, you calculate all that stuff, you think about it in estimate activity resources. But when it comes to the passage of time, 3 days to dig a hole, or 1 week, or whatever, we're talking about the duration. There is a difference. All right, so just be used to that. Now, in the world of the PMI, in the 5th edition, this is not in the 6th, but in the 5th edition, we see the use of 3 estimating approaches in this process, estimate activity duration. We see the use of 3-point, parametric, but not bottom up. Bottom up is seen in estimate activity resources. And what's the final estimating approach? 3-point, parametric, bottom up, and one that begins with the letter A. What is the one that I'm missing? 3-point, parametric, and what? Because all these 4 make up the estimating approaches used in the PMBOK guide. Thank you, Dev. You are correct. Analogous. Analogous estimating. So EAD uses these 3. The way you can get around it, the duration, you got to think with your EAD. Did you notice EAD, if you put an H there, it makes head. You got to think with your head. You got your eyes, you got your ears, you got your senses. You got a lot of senses. So I usually think about these 3 as 3 senses that are associated with my head. But EAR is just my ear. It's just one. It's just bottom up. So I find that funny. Very good question, Nima. Nima asked a question, what is the major difference between analogous and parametric. So we're going to take a look at the PMBOK guide, but let me give you Phil's version. Parametric uses a statistical relationship between variables, and it could very well use some sort of algorithm to calculate the estimate. Analogous does not. It's not that sophisticated. Analogous could be your CEO saying, we did this 5 years ago and it cost us $10, or it took us 5 months, so this should be the same. Or this project is twice as hard, so I'm going to estimate it will take 10 months. You're not really putting as much deliberateness and a statistical relationship between variables into analogous. They both use some sort of historical information, but parametric is more precise because it uses this statistical relationship between certain variables. So let's read this while we are here to better understand what exactly this is. So if you take a look at page 170, we have parametric estimating. And it says, parametric estimating is an estimating technique in which an algorithm, I would highlight that word, is used to calculate cost or duration based on historical data and project parameters. Parametric estimating uses a statistical relationship between historical data and other variables, for example, square footage, to calculate an estimate for activity parameters such as cost, budget, and duration. It then says activity durations can be quantitatively determined by multiplying the quantity of work to be performed by labor hours per unit of work. And it gives you a long example there, all right? So that's parametric. And let's take a look at analogous on page 169. It says analogous estimating is a technique for estimating the duration or cost of an activity or a project using historical data from a similar activity or project. Analogous estimating uses parameters from a previous similar project, such as duration, budget, size, weight, and complexity, as the basis for estimating the same parameter or measure for a future project. When estimating durations, this technique relies on the actual durations of previous similar project as a basis for estimating the duration of the current project. So what is missing? The big thing missing is the analogous, I beg your pardon, the big thing missing is the algorithm and the statistical relationships, discussion. It says it is a gross value estimating approach, sometimes adjusted for known differences in project complexity. Analogous duration estimating is frequently used to estimate project duration, where there is a limited amount of detailed information about the project. So where you don't have details, you have people saying, oh, it's going to take this based on that, but it's not detailed. All right? Does that help? So major difference. One uses an algorithm, one just uses historical information. And when it comes to parametric, we could also factor in an algorithm to account for the learning curve, where people have been doing something for a long time, they get quicker, that kind of thing. All right, so those are the major differences. I should also mention that analogous is also a type of top-down estimating. All right. So that was a little discussion about the tools and techniques here. Estimate activity resources uses bottom-up. If we have a difficult task, we need to break it down further using a bottom-up approach for that activity. Let me give you a quick visual on how this works. Thank you, Nina. I'm glad that worked and helped. So let's take a look at what exactly PMI is alluding to in estimate activity resources, because I don't want you to mix up bottom-up with the other ones that we use. So in estimate activity resources, this is how it works. You've got a task. Let's call it task A. So you're estimating the resources for task A, and you get to a point where you can't do a thorough estimate because the activity seems too complicated, or there are elements that you don't have a firm grasp of. If you're using bottom-up, you need to break this task down into sub-tasks. So you got subtask 1, for example, subtask 2, all the way to subtask N, whatever that is. And then you find out the resource hours. This is not about duration. This is about resource effort. So if you come out with your estimates of 5 days, 3 days, 6 days, for example, you then add all of these up. Oh, I beg your pardon, 5 hours. These are not days. And this is actually the difference I wanted to point out. This is effort. So we've got hours versus days, because it's not duration, it's about the effort. So if we add these up, we get 14 hours. This is the effort, the resource effort for task A. So this is different from what you do in estimate activity durations, in which we do not use bottom-up. We only use bottom-up in estimate activity resources. But in estimate activity durations, what we're doing is finding out how long, based on the number of hours and based on the constraints and assumptions, can we spread these 14 hours over a period of 3 days? 14 hours in 3 days. The days is what you're trying to compute in estimate activity durations. The hours is what you're trying to compute in estimate activity resources. It's in this one that you would use your 3-point, your analogous, and your parametric. And you actually could find yourself doing EAD using analogous without even touching the resource portion. Because on a lot of projects, people don't follow all of these in planning their schedule. They might just do develop schedule. They might just jump straight into this and cut out everything else. And as they're doing develop schedule, they're beginning to come out with these resource requirements and the duration. It's kind of like doing it in the reverse. And that's why PMI talks about tailoring. If you tailor this to the way you do business, you may not do everything here, and you may not do everything in this order, okay? So anyway, that's pretty much what we're doing in EAR versus EAD. Big difference between the two. All right, develop schedule, we talked about that. We come out with our schedule, and let's take a look at develop schedule. You guys chatted in the schedule baseline as being a major output. You're right. But we also have the project schedule. So if you take a look at page 173 in the outputs, we've got quite a number of important things. The schedule baseline. This is the original schedule, etched in stone, agreed upon by management. What is the difference between a schedule baseline and the project schedule? The project schedule is a living, breathing document that could change, but the schedule baseline does not change. Schedule baseline is a snapshot of the schedule at a particular time as approved by management, and then as you go through the project schedule gets updated, it gets modified. Does the PM need permission to change the schedule? No. The schedule does need to change to reflect what is actually going on the project. All right. So what else do I need to call out on this page? Critical path needs no introduction. You guys probably know that. It's one of the first things people do when they get to time management, right? Critical chain method. Can you guys chat into me? What is the overarching name? I'm talking about the umbrella name for the buffers that are mentioned in the critical chain method. What is the overall term for those buffers? Can you chat that in? Overall name of the buffers used in the critical chain method. That is one of them, Dev, but that is not the umbrella term. Very good attempt, though. I'm glad you know project buffers. But that is one of the types, but there's an overarching overall type. What is it called? I'll tell you where the answer is in a second. If you go to page 178 in the PMBOK guide, the answers hide in there. All right. I would suggest that you take a look at that because you might need that information later on. By the time I give you a few more questions, you might want to refer to that. All right. Let's go on to the next one, control schedule. So in control schedule, this is where we are preventing the schedule from going off track. And I would like to call your attention to this. Thank you, Abjit, for typing that in. I think you guys need to read page 178 at some point before we leave today. The answer is actually duration buffers. Duration buffers. Okay, but I'll let you guys look that up. All right. So we're going to talk about control schedule, and I'm going to read what exactly is done in control schedule, and then we'll move on to our quiz for the day. I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to work on a quiz in the next few seconds here. So let's read this quick. It says control schedule is the process of monitoring the status of project activities to update project progress and manage changes to the schedule baseline to achieve the plan. The key benefit of this process is that it provides the means to recognize deviation from the plan and take corrective and preventive actions and thus minimize risk. That is a very interesting take on control schedule, isn't it? Had you read it that way before? The key benefit of this process is that it provides the means to recognize deviation from the plan and take corrective and preventive actions and thus minimize risk. Did you know that's what you were doing? You see the all woven risk, schedule, cost, scope. It says tools and techniques are shown, blah, 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 as they usually do. If you turn the page over, it says updating the schedule model requires knowing the actual performance to date. Any change to the schedule baseline can only be approved through the Perform Integrated Change Control process. Control schedule as a component of the Perform Integrated Change Control process. Wait a minute, they just said control schedule is a component of Perform Integrated Change Control. You see why you need to read this book? If someone said, which of the following is a component of Perform Integrated Change Control, and you had control schedule, would you have selected that as the option? You need to read this book, folks. I tell you, there's a lot of hidden stuff here. So it says, control schedule as a component of PICC is concerned with determining the current status of the project schedule, influencing the factors that create schedule changes, determining if the project schedule has changed, and managing the actual changes as they occur. And then it goes further to say on page 187, if any agile approach is utilized, wait a minute, agile. You're talking about agile in the 5th edition? I didn't know that stuff existed here. You see why you need to read this book? There's a lot of stuff that has been baked into the book, but if you don't take it apart, you're not going to see it. So it says, determining the current status of the project schedule by comparing the total amount of work delivered and accepted against the estimates of work completed for the elapsed time. And it goes on and on. I would like you to read page 187 to understand the agile application when it comes to control schedule. This stuff is brought to the surface a lot more in the 6th edition. So when it comes to agile, there are ways we control our schedule that are talked about on page 187. It talks about retrospective reviews. What on earth is a retrospective? So if you haven't gotten a little bit of your feet wet in agile, you need to go look up what a retrospective is, right? And you need to know what is done there. Also, it talks about backlog. What on earth is a backlog? Bullet 3, go read that up. Know this stuff. Determining the rate at which the deliverables are produced. They're talking about velocity. This is where your agile game comes in, folks. So if you haven't studied agile a little bit, I would encourage you to go into YouTube when we're done here. I've got a couple of videos on agile, but there are a lot of great authorities on agile. You might want to go to the mothership, the source. Look for videos associated with the Agile Alliance and the Scrum Alliance and read up a little bit more. You want to know about your retrospectives, your backlogs. You want to know what a sprint is. You want to know what a burn down chart is. You want to know what velocity is. All of that stuff, people think it's just in the 6th, but there's a lot of gold buried here, folks. And if you come across agile questions, you're going to be on your A game. You're going to kill it because you're going to have known all of that stuff, right? So that is control schedule for you. And I am ready to give you guys a little bit of fun. How about I warm you up with 1 or 2 namby-pamby questions? How about that? 1 or 2 namby-pamby questions just to get you in that zone. You ready? Here's a namby-pamby question. You are working on a new project. Senior management has concurred with the team regarding the WBS. Which of the following should you work on in the next knowledge area? You see that? Thank you, Abjit, for typing that in, and Atif and Thomas, very good. So let's see if you guys got it right. Fantastic, you're right, activity list. Well done, guys. Very good, good job. Everybody got B, awesome. Let's take a look at the next one. This is a bit of a long one. You have been promoted as the VP, Department of Homeland Security. Your high-profile project has grown over 35% in technical scope during your first month in this new job. It's a long story. Now, this kind of question is long-winded, but you do not get this on the PMP exam. It's too easy because all of the text has no correlation or specific correlation with the final answer. That's why I call them namby-pamby. This is a little bit easy. This is the higher grade of namby-pamby, but it's not hard because all you need to do is read the last sentence. Which of the following is the tool and technique of the control scope process? Now, to make this question more difficult, the question writer should have described control scope and then said, which of the following is a tool and technique of this process? Then you would have had to read it. You see, but it's namby-pamby. All right, so what's the answer to this one, folks? I've got one chat. Is everybody else thinking? All right, this is a namby-pamby one. But hey, if you don't know it, you don't know it. So this could also be a lethal question for someone who doesn't know it cold. You got to know it cold. Thank you, Dev. And Atif, you are correct. It is variance analysis. A. Here's another one. Another namby-pamby one with a lot of story. Why am I showing you questions like this? I want you to very quickly analyze. Does all of this make sense? And does it boil into the final question or not? So if it says, which of the following is an output of, and it mentions the process name, then you know all of this is garbage. But if it says, which of the following is a tool and technique of this process, you know you're going to have to figure out what the process is. All right. So which of the following is a tool and technique of the control schedule process? Is it trend analysis, variance analysis, manage leads and lags, or scheduling tool? What do you think? This is where you either know it or you do not. Got one chat come in. UAgreeTube. Did I get that right? Good to see you, UAgreeTube. Thank you for chatting that in. Atif, thank you for chatting that in. Now, folks, I would like you to please open up your PMBOK guide to figure 6-1, because I've got a surprise for you. That is not the correct answer, even though it's a namby-pamby question. These are those that you either know or you don't. And if you don't, it's a problem. All right, so it's not similar to scope management. It is a different animal, time management is. And the answer to this is nothing other than your scheduling tool, the 7th one. Now, if you read the 4th edition, there is a possibility that you are confused, thinking that they are both variance analysis, but they're not. Now, variance analysis could be used in some respect, but it's not explicitly called out in the PMBOK Guide 5th edition. So the answer is scheduling tool, which is explicitly called out. That is the best option, okay? Let's do 2 more, and then we'll get into our personal quiz. You guys will have to take the quiz, on your machine when we get there. Question 4. You are in project time management defining activities. Which of the following is a tool and technique used to create the activity list? Select all that apply. All right, now don't be moved by what it's saying. It could be a trick. You want to be aware of tricks. Now on the real exam, you don't have select all that apply, but I thought this could be fun. My warped idea of fun, that is. So let's see. What's the answer? Is it rolling wave, composition, resource calendars, or activity attributes? What is it? What do you think? Oh, A and D, says someone, says Dev. Someone says B, or C, someone says C. Okay, good. So we've got AD, and then we've got C. Thank you, Atif, for chatting that in. So let me help you. There's a trick to answering questions on the PMP exam when they specifically ask you, those rare appearances where they ask you what tool, or technique, or what input, or what output, and maybe there are a couple of those that you could find. They're not very common, but when you do, you want to eliminate those that cannot be right, okay? So because it says tool and technique, folks, I am going to eliminate those that are not tools and techniques. Resource calendars is not a tool and technique, and activity attributes is not a tool and technique. Those could be inputs or outputs. So we get rid of those. And then it says rolling wave planning and composition. Well, I'm not in literature class, so it can't be composition. I think they meant decomposition. So I get rid of composition, and that's the correct answer. It is only A. The others are tricks. So the answer is rolling wave planning. And if you go to page 143 and you take a look at where you are creating the activity list, that describes what? Define activities. So in other words, they're saying, what is the tool and technique of define activities? And the tools and techniques of define activities are decomposition, rolling wave planning, and expert judgment. All right? So I hope these are helping you. One more, and then we'll go on to our personal quizzes on our machines. It says you've been selected as the PM on a project to test and deploy an application to monitor and analyze infectious diseases and biological events. Management has requested a peer review of your project schedule network diagram. Okay. In which process is this created? We actually had a little quiz about that, remember? So I'm hoping you guys get that one right. Very good question, Zimakona. I'm going to answer that after this. So Atif has chatted in an answer. Thank you very much, Atif. Okay. Anyone else got a chat? Okay, let's go with what Atif has chatted in. That is the correct answer. It is sequence activities. Thank you very much, Atif. Atif, tell me, did you go for a 35 contact hour course where you are? And please remind me, I've seen your chats on the channel, but I can't remember which country you're in at the moment. I'm curious to know. You seem to have got some of this stuff down pretty good. And are you taking your exam soon? Zimakona, your question, can one change the project plan even if it has been approved by senior management, I think you mean? Because the approvers of the project management plan is not typically the change control board. The change control board approved changes, right? So I think you mean, can one change the project management plan even if it has been approved by the change control board? I think that's what you mean. Sure, they are the approving authority. But let me show you something very important, really quick. Really quick, Zimakona. I'm going to go to Performing a Grade Change Control, page 94. Page 94. And you bring up a really, really good point, because where we are right now is associated with Performing a Grade Change Control, as we just read. So you can follow me on page 94. It says, Performing a Grade Change Control is a process of reviewing all change requests, approving changes, and managing changes to deliverables, organizational process assets, project documents, and the project management plan. So it says approving changes and managing changes. So that means we can. Let's read further. It says, and communicating their disposition, so telling people what has become of those change requests. It says, it reviews all requests for changes or modifications to project documents, deliverables, baselines, or the project management plan, and approves or rejects the changes. The key benefit of this process is that it allows for documented changes within the project to be considered in an integrated fashion while reducing project risk, which often arises from changes made without consideration to the overall project objectives or plans. And then if you turn the page over, there is some interesting information here which I would like to call out. So if you keep reading along, page 96, there are 4 paragraphs. I'm reading the last sentence on the 3rd paragraph. Okay? So are you ready? Let's read it. It says, customer or sponsor approval may be required for certain change requests after CCB approval. What? You mean the CCB is not the overarching authority? You mean someone else, another entity on top of them, could be required? That's what PMBOK guide says. Customer or sponsor approval may be required for certain change requests after CCB approval unless they are part of the CCB. You see how they set that up? That is a question right there. That is a question waiting to happen, folks. There's also another point that I want to bring out to you here. So let's read the very beginning of the 3rd paragraph. It says, every documented change request needs to be either approved or rejected by, not by the change control board, folks, by a responsible individual, usually the project sponsor or project manager. Wow. You mean the CCB may not be required to approve? Yeah, the PMI said it. It says the responsible individual will be identified in the project management plan or by organizational procedures. So that is a long-winded way, Zimakona, of saying, yes, your project management plan could change, you know, especially when change control board does not come into the picture and it calls that person the responsible individual. And it says it could be the PM. So you could get questions that test you along these lines. Yes, Zimakona, I heard from Sade about her passing the exam, and I'm extremely delighted that she passed. And I actually need to get something across to her. And I do not have her email, so if you do have her email, do me a favor and shoot it to me. Zimakona, if I'm not mistaken, you have taken the mock exam. Have you taken the mock exam, the full 4-hour mock exam? I thought you've taken one of our mock exams. I want to be absolutely sure. But I know you've not taken the marathon mock, but I thought you'd taken another one. Maybe I'm imagining things. Okay. So anyway, the answer to that is sequence activities. Are you guys ready? We are going to have some fun. Open up a separate browser. And I would like you to go to the following link. The link is on the screen. tinyurl.com/Savage PMP time. Can you guys do that? Let me try and chat it into the box. And in that way, you can just click on it. Now, this will not work on a phone. It will not work on a mobile device like a phone because it uses Flash. Okay? But some of you who did the quiz last week, you know how this works. So sorry if you're not able to see this on your phone, but I'm going to give it 5 minutes. So that's the link. It doesn't want me to send it, but I'm glad you can see it on the screen. Tiny, you know, YouTube has a way of filtering out what it thinks is spam. So I'm going to try and be creative in how I type it in. But those of you who are watching after the fact, go to this link and take the quiz, and let's see where you stand. It won't let me type it in, folks. It's detected it's a tiny URL,
and it thinks I'm spamming people. Or perhaps they're jealous I'm not using the Google shortener, the Google URL shortener. Maybe it knows it's competition, so it's not very happy. All right. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes, or 6 minutes actually. Let's be fair. 1 minute, 12 seconds. Open up your browser, and I'm going to come back and take a look at how well everyone has gotten along with this little quiz. Okay. I will be notified when you are done, okay? Thank you, Mr. Dev. I see yours coming in. Just waiting for a couple more to come in. And and then I'll conclude that we're done. You probably notice it's a timed quiz. So I'm going to go over the questions. Don't worry, I know that it just ended the exam and it's not showing you the rationale. I'm going to go through that with you. So spoiler alert for those who are watching after the fact. Please do not watch the answer section. Don't watch the answer section until you have taken the quiz, folks. All right? So we're going to take a look at the answers the next few minutes. Thank you for participating. Al Saidi, I see that. Shveta, I see that as well. So I think we've got 3 results come in, and I appreciate you guys for participating in it. So we'll take a look at the answers. Just giving it a few seconds. I don't want to show the answers while people are still working. But I think for most of you, your time probably ran out. Okay. Well, if there are any more, I'll be able to see them. But for now, let's take a look at the answers. I am going to be explaining to you what exactly all of this means. All right. All right, again, spoiler alert. For those folks who are still working on the quiz, you might want to turn down your speakers and don't listen to us until you finish. I don't want you to be tempted. Tempted to change your answers. Yes, Dev, I am going to explain. I'm going to explain what happened. All right. So, let me advance the slide. It's a little bit slow here. Signal's going through a little bit slowly. All right. Okay, here we go. So this was the first, hang on a second. I'm going to have to start it up from the first slide again. This was the first question that you guys encountered. Some of you encountered, I should say. Not all of you, because your questions were all the same, but they were arranged differently. So you may have come across this one last or the other one first, I don't know. But anyway, it says, your firm has been awarded a project to revamp infrastructure on an abandoned land for use by the general public. An activity list. You know, whenever I'm going through this stuff and I hear, you know, a word, you know, I see a word or I hear it in my head, I highlight it. So what am I saying? On your PMP exam, you will also be given the option of highlighting, and that is a left click and drag. So things like this, like the activity list, task list, I see that. I'm going to highlight it because it's an item of interest that I need to call out. So you've got these mechanisms on your Parametric interface for you to highlight stuff of interest. It says an activity list and schedule management plan were produced immediately, developed as part of scheduling the project. All right. And then it goes on to say, what should the project manager have done before this? All right, now here are the options. A, plan how to manage the schedule. B, first create the scope baseline. C, estimate activity resources. And D, estimate activity durations. Now, when I was reading this before the meeting, I'm going to be honest with you. You know what happened to me? I didn't read this. I just saw activity list. Oh, that's what has been done. You see the trick? They put the second item first. So if you read, oh, activity list, and in your head you just said, oh, that's the first thing that was done, you miss the schedule management plan. And it's kind of reverse psychology. They put the most important thing second, and if you read it quick, you missed that the schedule management plan has already been done, just like I did. I got the question I wrote wrong because I didn't read the details. And that is an example of what happens to a lot of people on the exam. So, plan how to manage the schedule has already been done. That can't be the answer. Estimate activity durations comes after what has been described, and so does estimate activity resources. So the answer is actually B. All right? So first create the scope baseline is the correct answer. All right? The next one here, your firm has been awarded a project to carry out an analysis of a product's partial life cycle from resource extraction, cradle to the factory gate. Now, when you see stuff like this, if you're not technically inclined, don't feel bad and don't immediately say, oh, this is difficult. Read it through, all right? Because a lot of this stuff, some folks have no experience in this, right? But it's kind of generic as well. It just sounds a bit technical. An analysis of a product's partial life cycle from resource extraction, cradle, to the factory gate. As your final analysis is completed, you decide to make the team work overtime. So what I'm going to do, again, is highlight, because my antenna goes up, and I'm like, okay, this sounds familiar. So the team is going to work overtime for double pay since they are behind schedule. Then I highlight behind schedule. And then it says, which PMBOK guide process does this describe? So here are the options. A, control cost. B, develop schedule. C, control schedule. And D, schedule compression. So again, this is not entirely like questions you could get, in that it is scenario based, but it's not asking what you do next. It's asking what should you describe, or what process does this describe? And it said process. So immediately as you go through these, which one can you guys strike out that is not a process? Which one is not a process in this list? D, thank you, Atif. D is not a process. Schedule compression is a tool and technique. So I am immediately going to strike that one out. And if I read it, it says overtime. You guys probably know this already, right? Overtime describes what? Overtime. What is overtime? When you're paying people overtime, what does that describe? In the world of time management. Overtime is associated with fast tracking or crashing. Which one? Is it fast tracking or is it crashing? Overtime. Overtime is associated with schedule compression, all right, but is it fast tracking or crashing? More resources, says Atif, you're right. So it's looked at like more resources, it is crashing. So it's not even fast tracking, it's crashing, but schedule compression is a tool and technique. That's not what they're asking, okay? So it's asking, what process do you do crashing? That's really what they're asking. Based on where the team is at the moment. So it says, as your final analysis is completed, oh, well, it means that the team has started getting work done. If the team has started getting work done, you guys cannot be in planning because you are beginning to get stuff done. You are beginning to rake up those hours. So it says your final analysis is completed. It means that the team has been working on other things. So first of all, crashing and fast tracking are not used in the cost knowledge area. So again, you can get rid of A. We're going to get rid of control cost. Okay, even though it says double pay and it alludes to some sort of cost, it's not control cost, because you should know that overtime is part of crashing, right? Overtime and additional resources, as Atif typed in, right? That is all crashing. Crashing, right? So be careful with that stuff. And we're going to open up the PMBOK guide. There's some stuff I'll show you later on. So the question is it develop schedule or control schedule? Let me show you what makes this even more confusing. What makes it even more confusing is that when we talk about schedule compression, we could compress our schedule before the team begins to work, you know, as a means of getting stuff done in a more compressed way. But in this instance, we can see that you are not in planning. You've left planning. Team is doing their final analysis. So if you take a look at page 143, you can see schedule compression is used in developed schedule, and schedule compression is also used in 6.7, control schedule. In developed schedule, you are in planning. In control schedule, you're taking action to make sure that your schedule gets back on track or that you avert some disaster. So the answer, again, can be deduced by crossing out the wrong one. It's not developed schedule because that's in planning. It would have to be control schedule because that alludes to work being ongoing and the PM trying to take action. All right? So, as your final analysis is completed, you decide to make the team work overtime for double pay. Since they are behind schedule, you are not behind schedule in developed schedule, but you could be behind schedule in control schedule. In fact, one of the things about control schedule is to make sure we take corrective action if we are lagging behind. All right? So I hope that explains that one. I know I'm taking a long time to go through them, but I want folks who are at home to really glean from what or how you should think about these questions. And you can apply this elimination technique to any question you see. The next one, it says, your firm has been awarded a project to carry out a significant green initiative. As your project progresses, a team member requests for a feed-in buffer to be applied to the project towards the end of the endeavor. Which of the following statements is correct? So to answer this, you need to know the different buffers and where they're placed on the project.
or in the critical chain. So in the critical chain method, I believe that was 170, was that 178? Yep, 178. 178. So it talks about the critical chain quite a bit, and then in the second paragraph, third line, it says, additional buffers known as feed-in buffers are placed at each point where a chain of dependent activities that are not on the critical chain feeds into the critical chain. Feed-in buffers thus protect the critical chain from slippage along the feed-in chains. And then it says the size of each buffer should account for the uncertainty in the duration of the chain of dependent activities leading up to that buffer. Once the buffer schedule activities are determined, the planned activities are scheduled to their latest possible planned start and finish dates. And then it says, consequently, instead of managing the total float of network path, the critical chain method focuses on managing the remaining buffer durations against the remaining durations of chains of activities. Remaining durations of chains of activities. But before that, it mentions the two types of buffers. So we've come across feed-in buffers and the general term of duration buffers. But if you recall, Dev chatted in another type of buffer, which is also in this paragraph somewhere, known as the project buffer. So if you read this very carefully, you'll see it says the critical chain method uses activities with durations that do not include safety margins, logical relationships, and resource availability with statistically determined buffers composed of the aggregated safety margins. In other words, you take out your safety margins and you dump them in these buffers, and you only use these buffers when required. So there are two types of buffers, right? Project buffers and duration buffers. So I'm trying to avoid reading the whole thing, but I'm looking for where the project buffers are. If you look at figure 6-19, it's very obvious where the project buffer is. So that's part of the background you need for this question, all right? The project buffers are at the end. The feed-in buffers can be placed where you've got different paths leading into a critical path activity. So anyway, it says, which of the following statements is correct? The project manager could use a project buffer. The project manager will not use a duration buffer. This describes the critical path method. This does not describe the critical chain method. Looking at the options really quick, we can begin to eliminate them. Now, the first one, the project manager could use a project buffer. We're going to hold on to that one, okay, because it's neither here nor there. The second one is clearly incorrect. Why? Because the feed-in buffer and the project buffer are both known as duration buffers. So I need to show you where that is in this paragraph. I'm trying to find the exact place where it mentions the project buffers in this paragraph. Perhaps it's my glasses, but I can't. Okay, here we go. So it says one buffer on the second line of the second paragraph. One buffer placed at the end of the critical chain, as shown in figure 6-19, is known as the project buffer and protects the target finish date from slippage along the critical chain. Then it says additional buffers known as feed-in buffers are placed at each point where a chain of dependent activities that are not on the critical chain feeds into the critical chain. So what am I trying to tell you? Both of those buffers have a collective name known as duration buffers, all right? So for us to say that it cannot be a duration buffer or will not use a duration buffer is wrong. So B is clearly wrong because either way, whether you use a feed-in buffer or a project buffer, they are both called duration buffers. So it can't be B. C says this describes the critical path. It's not the critical path. It's the critical chain, right?
And then D says this does not describe the critical chain. It does describe the critical chain. So at the end of the day, you are only left with A. A is the most fitting answer. If I'm not using a feed-in buffer, then I could use the project buffer. That would be the most sensible thing. But for you to answer this, you need to know the critical chain method really well. So the answer is A. A bit of a, tough one, but if you know the critical chain well and you know what those buffers are called, this would be easy. All right, here's another one. Your firm has been awarded a project to design an inexpensive cutting-edge alternative fuel. This has involved few scientists and engineers in the early stages. Towards project end, you decide to run certain tasks in parallel and pay a premium to expedite certain chemicals. What does this describe? Is it fast tracking? Is it crashing? Is it schedule compression or start to start? Now, to show you the answer for this, I'm going to go to where we've got schedule compression. Schedule compression, again, is used in develop schedule. If you look carefully, you'll find this on page 181. So if you take a look at page 181 and read under schedule compression, it says, crashing, a technique used to shorten the schedule duration for the least incremental cost by adding resources. Examples of crashing include approving overtime, bringing in additional resources, or paying to expedite delivery to activities on the critical path. Crashing works only for activities on the critical path. If you read fast track, and it says, a schedule compression technique in which activities or phases normally done in sequence are performed in parallel for at least a portion of their duration. An example is constructing the foundation for a building before completing all of the architectural drawings. Fast tracking may result in rework and increased risk. Fast tracking only works if activities can be overlapped to shorten the project duration. All right, so here they're talking about running tasks in parallel. That's fast tracking. So why don't we highlight that so that we keep our eye on these familiar terms? Run certain tasks in parallel, fast tracking, and pay a premium to expedite certain chemicals. So with that, this is describing both fast tracking and crashing, not just fast tracking. See? Overtime is crashing. Paying a premium is crashing. Doing things in parallel, as we read a few seconds ago, phases in parallel, activities in parallel, that is fast tracking. So we can say, what does this describe? If we say fast tracking, it's not entirely correct because it's more than fast tracking. This is fast tracking, but this is crashing. So we can't say it's fast tracking, and we also can't say it's crashing because it's both. Start to start is totally off, so the only option left is schedule compression. It could only be schedule compression. So that is the correct answer, folks. That is a really bad question in that it makes you think, oh, it's all fast tracking. No, if you didn't know that paying a premium to expedite certain chemicals or certain services or goods is crashing, you would think it's all fast tracking. Dev is laughing. He says, most confusing. Yeah, this is why we got to be savage. So the more stuff you know, the more you're going to be able to be aggressive against a question. All right, here's the next one. As part of direct and managed project work processes, you derive a measurement that describes Oh, are we done? Did I cover all 5 already? I think I've lost track. Did I cover 1, 2, 3, 4? Oh, no, this is the final one. Okay. As part of direct and managed project work processes, you derive a measurement that describes the light intensity in your project's work environment. Did you guys get this one as well? Did you get it? Okay. This measurement is a raw observation which needs a further, deeper analysis to indicate certain scope management challenges. This raw observation is an input to which time management process. Then it says plan schedule, control schedule, and control scope, and lastly, monitor and control project work. So here's the big thing, folks. If you were reading it and you missed time management process, then you could choose a wrong option. So right now we're gonna cross out anything that is not time management. So even though it mentions scope in the question, the raw observation they're talking about exactly could be from anywhere. So the raw observation is from one place, I beg your pardon. WPD is from direct and manage, but then it says which needs a deeper analysis to indicate certain scope management challenges. This observation is an input to which time management process. They're talking about the raw observation. They're not talking about scope. So we're going to get rid of anything that is not time. It says schedule and control scope. That's wrong because it's specifically asking WPD is an input to which time management process. That's it. We can also cancel monitor and control project work because that is where WPI goes. Do you see what I'm saying? The bottom line is this raw observation is an input to which, let me highlight it. I don't think we've fully gotten it. Time management process. It didn't say to which processes. It didn't say to which process. If it had said to which process, then we could have gone for C. But it said time management process. So we're going to cancel A because plan schedule does not use WPD as an input. B does. All right? So I know we spent quite a bit of time trying to explain the rationale, but these questions, they would make you think quite a bit, you know. The questions you prepared, having more than one question per question. So you mean it's loaded, it's stacked, it has a lot of details in it. It really needs a lot of thought. But what I need you guys to do is get to the point where you see stuff like this and it's like you've got x-ray eyes. You know, you can x-ray the question and see where it's going. And through intuition and through being an expert in your studying, you're able to hone in and just get the right answer. All right? So we have come to our 2-hour mark. I have a few other questions that I could ask you. Would you like me to ask you a couple more questions? Just a couple more? Would you like them to be easy or more difficult? I could ask you the easier ones, or I could ask you the more difficult ones. Which ones would you like? The easier ones? I have a feeling you want the more difficult ones. The more difficult ones. All right, let's do a few more difficult ones. Okay, here's another one. Do 2 more. You have been awarded a project to design a district energy system, DES system, for a client. Close to project end, the customer requested a significant change, which is approved by the CCB after reviewing certain reports. Which of the following is true?
Schedule forecasts are an input to monitor and control project work. B, schedule data is an input to the CCB. C, schedule forecasts are an input to plan schedule management. Or D, schedule forecasts are an input to control schedule. What do you think? I'm going to give you a few seconds to chat in what you think is the correct answer. And I'm going to top up my coffee cup. I know people on the East Coast should be awake, wide awake by now. It's 9 o'clock there. People in EMEA, you are going about your business. People in Asia Pac, my friends in Saudi and the UAE and Oman and other places, you guys are wide awake. Switzerland, you're buzzing. Hi Jay, how you doing? Good to see you. Okay, so Jay chatted in an answer, so did Atif and Dev. So let's take a look at this. This is one of those where you can easily eliminate. So let's go from the bottom up. It's actually good to go from the bottom up sometimes. Schedule forecasts are an input to control schedule. That's a lie. They are an output of control schedule. C says schedule forecasts are an input to plan schedule management. That's a lie. Schedule forecasts are only an input to one place in the entire PMBOK guide. And we actually talked about that very early on. Do you see? It's saying which of the following is true. Schedule forecasts are only an input to monitor and control project work. So B doesn't even make sense. It says schedule data is an input to the CCB. The CCB isn't even a process. So that doesn't make sense. The answer is A. Schedule data is not an input to an entity. That doesn't even make sense. All right. Takula Man, how you doing? So let me answer Takula Man's question. Takula Man says, can anyone send me some templates in Word format? Compliance register, document register, and a checklist template. So Takula Man, if you can go to this link, let me make sure it actually works. But I'm going to have to dictate it to you because I know YouTube doesn't like me typing in links. So type in tiny.cc/sigma, as in 6 sigma, PMO. And if you do that, I'm hoping that it forwards to the CDC site. I think it will. Yeah. Go to the CDC site, and you're going to be able to get, oh, there it is. So it worked. It let me type in a government link. Otherwise, YouTube would be in trouble for prohibiting a government site as spam. So, Takula Man, go to that link. You're going to see well over 20 to 30 documents that I think what you're asking for, you're probably going to find it there, or you could make one of those documents what you're looking for. So check that out, see if that works for you. All right, thank you for the question. Jay, it's good to see you. I hope your studying has been going well, and it seemed like you got the answer right. It's A, okay? Schedule forecasts. Which other forecasts are an input to monitor and control project work? You're welcome, Takula Man. Which other forecast is an input to monitor and control project work? Thank you, Dev. Cost forecast. Awesome. Very good. All right, let's move on. This is going to be our final question for the day. You have been awarded a short project to install several demountable partitions for a huge company move. An element in your task list is labeled as T.234.5, which is a task ID. They're being nice. They're telling you it's a task ID and not a WBS ID, so they're trying to be nice. This task will be taking place in Boston, Massachusetts, performed by Gilly Corp, your subcontractor. Which of the following describes this information best? Activity description, activity attributes, project task descriptions, and activity resource description. So the more you read the 5th edition, the more you're just going to laugh at questions like this that have a lot of bogus information. Okay? So let's take a look at a few of these things that are being called out here. I'm going to highlight them as they jump out at me. An element in your task list is labeled as this, task ID, okay? This task will be taking place in Boston, Mass. The fact that it's taking place in Boston, Mass is also something I want to highlight. And it's going to be performed by Gilly Corp. 3 things. These 3 things that have been called out are spot on with Atif's suggestion of the answer. The answer is indeed B. Well done, Atif, you got that right. Now, while we have some descriptions in there, the more precise term is going to be those activity attributes. And that is why you need to know exactly what these activity attributes are. Remember, we read this in the beginning. I actually covered this a little bit. Let's go to page 153 again. Let's go to the 3rd line. It says, the components for each activity evolve over time. During the initial stages of the project, they include activity ID, WBS ID, and activity label or name, and when completed may include activity codes, activity description, predecessor activities, successor activities, logical relationships, leads and lags, resource requirements, imposed dates, constraints, and assumptions. And it says activity attributes can be used to identify the person responsible for executing the work, geographic area, or place where the work has to be performed, the project calendar the activity is assigned to, and it goes on. And it says activity attributes are used for schedule development and for selecting, ordering, and sorting the planned schedule activities in various ways within reports. The number of attributes varies by application area. So this is another one of those that has a fine line, but it is best described by by B. A is part of B, but this is beyond just the description. It's telling you precisely a task ID. It's telling you precisely the location. It's telling you precisely a resource to be working on it. So as opposed to selecting the less precise one, you want to select the more precise one, okay? And in the PMBOK guide, note that certain things are called out as explicit outputs. So if you talk about an explicit output, none of these is an explicit output of anything except B. Okay, so we could cancel right off the bat activity resource description and project task descriptions because these are not formal outputs. Same thing for A. All right. So the best option is going to be the more precise thing. And this is when you really need to know what activity attributes is and what they're used for. Okay? I'm going to give you one more problem for the day. All right, you've been awarded a short project to install several demountable partitions for a huge company move.
the lowest element in your work breakdown structure is decomposed into 1.4.5.2. As you develop a task list, what can you deduce about this element? 1.4.5.2. Let's highlight that. That is definitely something that jumps out at me right here. And then it says, what can I deduce about this element? Well, if I look at the element to start with, I don't know if that is a work package. Oh, it does say it. The lowest element, let's highlight that, lowest element. Oh, it's a work package, okay. The lowest element in your WBS is decomposed into 1.4.5.2. And then it says, as you develop a task list, what can you deduce about this element? So now they've taken you from creating a WBS into actually breaking it down further into a task list, because you know your task list is not part of your WBS. Your task list or activity list is done as part of the schedule. Developing the schedule evolves from an activity list. So A, it has a more than one code of accounts. Well, first of all, it's grammatically incorrect, and secondly, it cannot have more than one code of accounts. So I would cancel that right off the bat. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not trained to ignore bad grammar. This is incorrect grammar, first of all, as many people complain about on this exam. And secondly, a WBS component cannot have more than one code of accounts. A code of accounts is the numbering scheme. So how can it have more than one number? How can it be 1.4.5.2 and at the same time 1.x.7. No, it can't. There's only one code of accounts. So A is wrong. B, it will be broken down into cost accounts. Now, if you know what a cost account alludes to, it alludes to a control account. But if you have the lowest level in your WBS, this work package, it cannot be broken down into a control account, even though it's not saying control account, it alludes to it, but it won't be broken down into cost accounts. Those exist at higher levels in the WBS. You know what I'm talking about? I'll give you a quick illustration of this, because what it's alluding to is wrong. You do not break down your WBS work package into control accounts. Your control accounts are broken down into lower level components. So what they're saying in essence is, if this is your WBS, it's more likely that your control account will be at, for example, a level 2, or on some projects it really depends. Maybe it is at level 3, but one thing's for sure, and that is your work package is definitely not going to be broken down into control accounts, because control accounts are higher up. So if this is your work package, your control accounts will probably be these, for example. Okay? One thing you can infer, though, is from the numbering scheme, that could be a 1, this could be a 1.1, this could be a 1.1.1, and this would be a 1.1.1.1, this would be a 1.1.1.2. Take a look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4 digits. Level 1, level 2, level 3 over here, and level 4. This is a level 4 element with 4 numbers. And that is how you can tell in the world of the PMI, when you're given a code of accounts, what level is it at? So 4 digits is at a level 4, okay? But anyway, B is wrong. It will be broken down into cost accounts is wrong. Cancel that. C, it is above level 4. Well, we just found out, count the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a level 4. It is not above level 4, it is level 4. So we can cancel out C, and that leaves us with only 1. That leaves us with the option that it is one of those elements that will undergo decomposition. But how can that be? Because we're talking about a work package. Surely a work package is not decomposed further, is it? Yes, it is. You decompose your work package further in defined activities. So the correct answer is actually this element will undergo decomposition. That is correct. Everything else is incorrect. All right? So I hope that was of value to you, because now we have come to the end of our review. But before I go, I would like to call your attention to a very important part of time management. And obviously we didn't have enough time to hit that, but I've got lots of videos about this out there on YouTube. And it's really about the critical path. So if you have an image like this, you need to know what the critical path is. You need to be able to do a forward pass and a backward pass. Okay? You are most welcome, Atif. So before I go, if you take a look at this, make sure that you're able to do a forward pass and a backward pass. Okay? Those of you watching, you might want to freeze the screen and try and solve it. So that's 1, 7, 9, 6, 5, 2, and 3. Should be easy for you to find the critical path, but I want you to do a forward pass and a backward pass. All right? So I'm going to show you the answer. That is the critical path right here. It's 17. Using the eyeball method, I'm sure you were able to do that pretty quick. And last but not least, this is your forward pass and the backward pass numbers if you are using the zero method. Zero method messes with certain people's heads. If you're one of those people, use the one method you're used to. But the only difference between the zero method and the one method is you would add a 1 to ES and LS. Everything else would pretty much be the same. The difficulties in using the one method are the longer-winded formulas, which always account for a -1. But ultimately, you would get the same thing for slack and float and all that. So I'm going to be on the move next week. I'm going to be hitting Europe. I'm going to be working on a project out there in Europe. And you guys are going to know about this project by the time it's done. It's going to be extremely powerful. It's going to be around a particular certification that the PMI has out there. But more on that later. So I'm going to be out to Europe. And while I'm out there, I'm going to endeavor to either record one of these ahead of time, or you are going to see me on Savage on Saturdays, but I'll be in the EU at that time. So I should be a little bit more awake. Instead of being 6 o'clock here on Saturday, 6 a.m., it's probably going to be 1 p.m. when I'm in Europe. All right. So thank you so very much. Do you guys have any questions or comments or concerns or anything you would like me to perhaps explain now or next week? Comments, concerns, questions? Do you want to shoot those into the chat box, and I will be more than happy to explain them to you. Leads and lags. Very good. Why don't we bring up an image that shows this? Leads and lags are explained in two images I have here. So I'm going to show you these two images. Take a very mundane, simple project, for example. We have a project where you are preparing dinner for your guests. Think about two of the activities in there. You prepare the dinner, and then you set the table. And we could show those relationships like this, as I'm about to draw on the whiteboard. So you've got prepared dinner. Let's call that A, and set table B. It's a finish to start relationship without any lead time. But what if you decided to accelerate set table? Why would you do that? Well, it helps you start working on something if you have resources to do it. So instead of it being like this, you could give it a somewhat overlapped relationship where you still have a finish to start, but you have lead time inserted in there. So this is A, this is B. Instead of you starting after, you overlap them. It's still a finish to start relationship, but it has this amount, or I should say this amount of lead time put into the schedule. And in Microsoft Project, you can see it here. Lead time is illustrated by a minus the duration or the lead time. So if I want to start this 30 minutes earlier than what is required, I use lead time. Do you use MS Project at all? So it's a negative value because you are actually saving time. Instead of adding time, you are subtracting time. So this is the idea. You're thinking about it like on a continuum, right? If you think about the number line that we learned back in school, back in primary school, you got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you are reducing time, you are going to go in that direction, and it's going to be a subtraction. See? But if you are doing the opposite and you are adding time, then it's going to be in this direction, right? And it's going to be addition. This is lag. You're lagging behind. You're spending more time. But this is lead time. You're spending less time. So instead of you spending a greater number of time, you're bringing it more to the left, subtracting, and this is your lead time. So lead is negative because you're saving time, right? You're subtracting hours from what you typically would spend, but lags is the opposite. You're adding time. So right here, we can only see the lead time example, but it's a very good question because guess what, Abjit? On the exam, you could be given network diagrams. Actually, let me show you this one in the book. You bring up a very good point, and I would like you guys to go study this diagram I'm about to call out in the book because I think it could help you better prepare and better know what to expect. It's actually in the sequence activities portion. I think it's shortly after. Yes. So on page 158, you can see it's got some examples of lag time and lead time.
But what I really want to show you is on page 160. So if you take a look at page 160, figure 6-11, you can see a finish to start relationship with lag time and a start to start relationship with lag time as well. You see? So on the PMP exam, let me actually show this to the camera because I want you guys to know what to expect. So I'm talking about this image right here, right? Don't be surprised if you find stuff like this on your PMP exam, all right? Don't be surprised. So to round off your question, Abjit, let me show you the second slide here for lags. So lag time is deliberately delaying a successor activity. You can see we've got build concrete foundation. Then we've got attach cap to concrete foundation. You don't just attach the cap, you have to allow time for concrete to cure. The curing of concrete is not a task. It's just a passage of time. So we insert lag time. In this case, we inserted 7 days to allow the concrete to cure, and then we attach the cap. So lag time is an addition. You can see it's a +7, you see. So that's the major difference between both. We use lag time to insert that intermission into the schedule. We use lead time to accelerate the start of an activity and to fulfill all righteousness, because this is a very important topic that you brought up, Abjit. So let's do it due diligence for those folks at home who may have a similar question. And let's read section 6.3.2.3, page 158. All right, it says, a lead is the amount of time whereby a successor activity can be advanced with respect to a predecessor activity. For example, on a project to construct a new office building, the landscaping could be scheduled to start 2 weeks prior to the scheduled punch list completion. So you can see the 2 weeks prior, you can see that acceleration there. It says this would be shown as a finish to start with a 2-week lead, as shown in figure 6-10. Lead is often represented as a negative value for lag in scheduling software. It says lead is often represented as a negative value in scheduling software. Let's just put it that way because they're putting lag together with it. I believe that might be a typo. But if you go to the next page, 159, it says, a lag is the amount of time whereby a successor activity will be delayed with respect to a predecessor activity. For example, a technical writing team may begin editing the draft of a large document 15 days after they begin writing it. This can be shown as a start-to-start relationship with a 15-day lag, as shown in 6-10. Lag can also be represented in project schedule network diagrams, as shown in figure 6-11, in the relationship between activities H and I, as indicated by the nomenclature start-to-start plus 10. Start-to-start plus 10 days lag, even though offset is not shown relative to a timescale. That is also a very important point. So if they're showing leads and lags in a network diagram, do not expect 2 weeks to always be as long as this. They might show it close and just show plus 2 weeks, because as you can see in the examples in figure 6-10, they look almost the same distance, but they are actually different. One is lead, one is lag. If you go to page 160, you take a look at FS plus 15, that is actually smaller than SS plus 10. So they're trying to tell you that in network diagrams, it's not shown to scale. All right, let me answer a few more questions. I hope that helps, Abjit. So, got a question from Takula Man. While I recently studied my master's degree in project management, what career path can you advise me to take? So let me ask you, Takulaman, is what you're studying aligned with the PMBOK guide, or is it more academic and maybe in a more general, should I say, body of knowledge than the PMBOK guide in particular? Because, like for me, when I did my master's degree, the project management discussions had nothing to do with PMBOK guide. Academic, there you go. So my suggestion is this. As you're studying, try and ask yourself, how different is this from the PMBOK guide? Are there any differences? If I know, or if I remember correctly, what you're studying probably has to do with a lot of general schedule management, leads, lags, things like that, managing time, managing costs in a more general sense, which is not bad because it gives you some of the vocabulary. But the specificity of the PMBOK guide, it sounds like, I don't know, are you going to end up reading the 6th edition? Because if you end up reading the 6th edition, definitely what they're teaching you is even further away from the 5th edition. So Takula, man, let me know. It seems like you're going to take the 6th edition. So what can I do to get started? Is taking the PMP the most important thing at this stage? So you've got a background in electrical, electrotechnics, and substantial knowledge of economics. Okay, good. So all of that knowledge and skill, Takula man, is all going to come into play because you're used to reading thick books and lots of definitions, and you've got both a technical background and a business background. So my suggestion to you will be to tune into this channel as much as you can and just casually go through the videos and begin to identify terms that are used in the PMBOK guide because they're very different from the academic. I did a master's in construction information technology from the University of Greenwich, wrote a dissertation on barriers to implementing project management information systems. But I went for my first interview after my master's for project management in DHL, and I sat down there and they asked me questions. I just looked like a dunce. I looked so stupid because I couldn't answer the PMP and Prince 2 oriented type questions. In fact, I didn't even know about those things. So how did I prepare for the interview? I was busy reading up on the SDLC, only to get in there and they're asking me terms I didn't even know. So academic, I can tell you, is very, very different, from real world Prince 2 PMP. So if I were you, I would casually watch the videos. I've got a track called 40 Days to PMP Exam Success. If you go to our channel homepage, you'll see 40 videos. It will just casually take you through project management from PMI's lens. You actually could watch me, every day for 40 days, and by the time you're done, you should have covered at a higher level what all of the processes in the PMBOK guide are. And I actually go into a few details for the exam as well. So that could be one of the things you do in the interim. But I would say in your downtime, when you're not in session, you might want to pick up the PMBOK guide and start studying for the PMP exam. So tell me, when are you finishing off your master's degree? Is it going to be next year? Because depending on how close it is, it might be realistic to start getting more familiar than jumping all out to do the PMP, because you also don't want to affect your academic study. It really depends. So I hope that gives you some ideas. I'm not going to advise you to jump into a course until, 2019. Are you working in the interim? Do you have a regular day-to-day job? Is the master's degree part-time? So Dev, I can see your questions. I'm going to attack those next. So if you're working at the moment and you're looking to gain some traction in having the common lexicon that the PMBOK guide provides, oh, good. Okay. Congrats about your promotion. I would say begin to digest the PMBOK guide bit by bit by bit, and then when you feel you are ready to launch out to take the exam, it's a full immersion. You have to be fully ready to jump into Kuleman and just do the whole thing, because it could get very intense. I spent 6 months studying for my exam. Many other students spend 3 months, 4 months. Some people spend a year. But if you do it with consistency, I would say you should be able to get it done within 4 months at worst, especially with your background. All right. So let me see. I saw a couple of chats after Kuleman. You're most welcome. So Dev says, what if the person is from a planning background? Let me read your other question. How does PMP help? Oh, okay. Are you a planning engineer, Dev? And when you say planning engineer, are you talking about IT? Or are you talking more about... All right, I see. How does construction management? Oh, good. Well, this is right down your alley. I can tell you that. Okay, you're a planning engineer in construction. All right. So, how does PMP help the planning engineer and construction manager in the construction industry? What is the difference of and importance of PMP for them? Very good question. So let me just also, I don't know if you're aware of this body. There's a body out there, and I've talked about them on a previous show, but I don't know if you've checked into this organization. They're quite cool, you know, for the construction manager. You might want to go read up a little bit about them. They can give you some good perspectives, but this is beyond PMP, you know, CII. The reason why I'm talking about the Construction Industry Institute is a lot of the PMs in that world are also PMPs. Why are they PMPs? They're PMPs because they found that there is value in this common lexicon. There are a lot of firms, so many government entities that are into PMP now, not just in the US, but also in Europe and other parts of the world, even in India. So knowing this common lexicon is a really big deal. So as a construction manager, as a planning engineer, you also want to be versatile to move across industries. You could be in construction of facilities, but then you might find yourself being in construction of vessels one day, who knows? But if you were challenged to do that, you can easily make the jump, you know, when you're able to speak the common lexicon, as opposed to just being trapped in construction terms and not being able to use general project management terms. I was also a controller in the environmental engineering space, which could be specific, but I realized after I got my PMP, I was able to better integrate with other PMs that were of, you know, the PMBOK guide background and mindset. Okay, so I hope that helps, Dev. Absolutely, go for it. The PMP, not only does it give you more value in terms of what you know and what you can speak to and what you can do, but in the long term, I see the PMP as being the benchmark for anyone who says they are an engineer and a project manager, or a project manager full stop. Definitely having the PMP is going to help you big time. Okay, Jay, I see your question. So Jay's question is, what is the difference between bottom-up estimating and cost aggregation? Very good. I'm going to tackle that. Okay. Oh, you used to work for USCOE. I see that. Interesting. Very good. Okay. So Jay, let me answer this question. Bottom-up versus cost aggregation. Two different things. Bottom-up estimating is exactly what it sounds like. Estimating. Estimating is not budgeting. When you talk about estimating, you're trying to estimate various activities, the cost for various activities. So let me show you this right here. If we honed into this image here, you'll see that we've got obviously various activities, various line items. Okay, let me go to another image that is clearer. This one here, oops, okay, this one, nope, this one, nope, this one. Okay, so if we are doing a bottom-up estimate, a bottom-up estimate is used in two processes in the PMBOK guide. The first one is estimate activity resources, and the second one is estimate cost. Now, I guess you're talking about estimate cost. Now, in estimate cost, estimate cost is the only process in the PMBOK guide where we use all four estimating approaches. And by the four, I mean bottom up, 3 point, parametric, and analogous. Okay? In estimate cost, we take, for example, an activity, let's call it activity X, and we take a look at its complexity. Maybe we feel, wow, this is very complicated. You're going to have to use a bottom-up approach by breaking this down into smaller pieces so that you can effectively estimate the cost. And these smaller pieces are actually known as subtasks. In most circles, subtask. You might see I talked about this a little bit earlier in estimate activity resources. So subtask 2, subtask 3, depending on how you get clarity, okay? Now what we're doing, don't forget, this, again, is an activity, okay? It is not the project. It's an activity. We're trying to estimate the cost for this activity. We broke it down into subtasks because the activity is of a complicated nature. Maybe the work needs to be broken down more to better understand it. So we have estimates such as $40K, $10K, $5K, $2K, for example. These are the lower level subtask estimates. And what we need to do ultimately is roll all of these up into a total amount that gives you the activities estimate. In other words, the activity cost estimate. That's really what we're getting at. So in order to get the activity cost estimate, we use bottom-up estimating. We've decomposed this activity to get further clarity about the money involved, about the various buckets of work involved. You might have already done this breakdown in estimate activity resources, because in estimate activity resources, we do the same thing We also use bottom up, but we use bottom up because we're trying to get the hours. Stuff like that. But this is done in estimate activity resources. What we're doing here is done in estimate costs. So when we do the calculation, we got 55, 57, got 57K, and that is the activity cost estimate for activity X. Now, this is bottom-up estimating. On the flip side, cost aggregating or cost aggregation is done in determine budget. So this is not cost aggregation. This is bottom-up estimating. Cost aggregation does not look at this level of detail. It looks at a more macro level of detail. So instead of you having something like that, you would have all of the activities for the project. Activity X, which we know is 57K. Activity Y, which is at the same level, so all of these are at the same level, and they taper up into the project level. Okay, ultimately, all of these are going to get to the project, all the way to activity, let's just call it activity N, to show that there are many activities. So if this is 57, this is 20, all of this comes to, 100K. We now roll all of these up into a final project total to give the project budget. So this is going to give us 177K. For example, this is your project budget. So at the end of the day, we look at this number as being the total amount that you're going to spend on the project. And that is different from what you did in estimate cost. This is determined budget now. So we're not talking about estimate cost at this point. This stuff we're doing here, cost aggregation, is done in determined budget. All right? Does that help explain? All right, let's see if we got any more questions before we call it a day. The Cooler Man says, please also leave some management book suggestions to complement my PMBOK guide. Absolutely. So, a few suggestions. Obviously, you're going to be reading the 6th edition. So at the moment, there is very little published literature based on the 6th edition. But what I can tell you, Cooler Man, is I have started putting out videos. You're welcome, Jay. I've started putting out videos for the 6th edition to complement these two. So I hope you've got this. This is definitely a good read. And this. If you read both of these casually and you follow along with our channel, they are going to make a whole lot more sense, okay? But at this time, there are very few books, if any. I haven't even seen any of the 6th edition guides. Now, when you get to the point that you truly mean business, where you truly, truly want to hit the books hard for your PMP, I would suggest you come in aboard our course. It's called PMP Exam Prep Camp. And you get our study guide with it. And our study guide, it's funny you're asking for templates, because this study guide is full of tables of templates. For example, these are templates. They give you ideas of majority of the templates and tools talked about in the PMBOK guide. So I would say don't waste time going anywhere else, because you want to have dialogue. Too many people going for PMP courses and they've got questions, and it's like pulling teeth to get hold of an instructor. But hey, we do this for the general public on YouTube, whether you're a student or not. How much more if you came on board our course? So we provide you with this. We present you the PMBOK guide in an easy to understand and fun way. And if you had any questions, you can always, send in the questions. Dev says, do you have any published earned value books and detailed values on it? Well, I appreciate that. I have a book called Earned Value Management Basics. If you Google it, you're sure to find it. Just Google it and type in my name, you'll find it. So I used earned value while I was in a well-known aerospace firm, and that was my job. And it was so much fun, I decided to write a book on it. Earned Value Management Basics. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. I actually thought we would finish earlier, but we've gone for our typical 3 hours, which is cool. Don't forget, if you have any questions throughout the period of your PMP prep, shoot them to us, all right? Just put them below. We've got a chat box below, and it would be nice to know what your questions are, gray areas on the exam, concerns. Takula man, you might want to look for my video on how many hours you expected to spend studying for the PMP exam. I put that one out a few days ago. All right? Thank you, Dev. Thank you. Happy Christmas to you as well. Happy New Year in advance. Season's greetings to everyone. And thank you again for subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to hit like if you have benefited from today's show. Don't forget to hit like. And also, say hello to my little friend, or not so little friend, Pimpy, who is a reminder of what the PMP exam is like. Bye. See you, folks. Have a good one. Pimpy, say bye. I don't say bye to project managers. Be nice. Bye. See you guys. Have a wonderful new year. Make sure you plan what you want for 2018. All right? Bye. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be safe.